Kevin Stefanski's recent press conference didn't just miss the mark, it exposed something deeper. While discussing Shedeur Sanders' struggles and the bizarre wristband error, Stefanski chose ambiguity over clarity at every turn. He wouldn't say who was responsible. He wouldn't say if not starting Sanders earlier was a mistake. And in sidestepping these questions, Stefanski painted a clear picture. His priority wasn't honesty or team development, it was damage control. When a coach is more concerned with his image than his players, it's not just disappointing, it's destructive. In the midst of all this, Sanders kept his head up. He answered tough questions, took responsibility, and showed the poise Stefanski lacked. It's a jarring role reversal, the rookie acting like a leader while the head coach clings to excuses.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
This isn't sustainable. If the Browns want to build a future around Sanders, they need to make sure he isn't being sabotaged by the very people meant to guide him. Leadership matters, and right now it's coming from the wrong place. Kevin Stefanski just might be the most quietly destructive figure in the Browns locker room, and not because of a losing record or some dramatic sideline meltdown. No, this goes deeper. This is the kind of leadership breakdown that creeps in through deflection, thrives on vague answers, and masks dysfunction with calm press conference tones. But beneath it, a mess. And at the center of it, Shedeur Sanders is paying the price. After the Browns lost to the Chicago Bears, all eyes should have been on growth, adjustments, and accountability. But instead, the narrative spiraled into something much darker. Allegations of deliberate sabotage, conflicting statements, and a head coach who seems far more interested in managing optics than managing his team. Let's start with the so-called wristband malfunction. Sanders struggled through a rough outing, poor offensive rhythm, miscommunication, and missed opportunities. But it wasn't nerves. It wasn't mechanics. It was logistics. Specifically, a wristband issue that Stefanski initially brushed off as miscommunication. But then Sanders told the truth, the play card fell out. That's not a miscommunication. That's a literal equipment failure. And in any other environment, the coach would have immediately stepped in to take full responsibility. Instead, Stefanski deflected, said little, and moved on. That's where the suspicion began. Because if the head coach can't be honest about something as basic and critical as a failed wristband, what else is he dodging? When a quarterback is in his first major start, the absolute bare minimum is making sure he has working tools. That card is his lifeline. Without it, every play becomes a question mark, and every snap risks disaster. And somehow, that happened to Sanders, and Stefanski just kept moving like it was no big deal. Except it was a big deal. It sabotaged Sanders' ability to lead the offense. It threw off the team's rhythm. It created confusion. And yet, Stefanski didn't stop the game to correct it. Didn't send in backup signals. Didn't explain anything to the public or, more importantly, to his player. This wasn't a minor oversight. This was a clear example of negligence, or worse, a calculated setup. Now, could it have been an honest mistake? Maybe. But then why lie? Why not come out and say, yeah, the card fell out. We missed it. That's on me. Why try to spin it as a communication issue? Because admitting that it was a mistake puts the blame squarely on the coaching staff. And Stefanski has made it very clear that accountability is not part of his playbook. You can't look at this in isolation. Stefanski's refusal to give a straight answer when asked if he regrets not starting Sanders earlier only adds to the mess. He danced around the question. Again, no direct yes or no. No hint of reflection. Just more smoke. And that's what exposes the real issue here. This isn't just about play calls or timing. This is about a head coach more focused on protecting his image than protecting his quarterback. Because had Sanders played earlier and shown promise, it would have exposed Stefanski for holding him back. That would have meant explaining why Sanders wasn't given a chance sooner. It would have meant admitting the coaching staff might not have made the right call. So instead, Sanders was kept on the bench. Then, when he finally got his shot, a wristband failure, zero support, and no accountability. And just like that, the damage was done. The loss to the Bears was painful, but the aftermath was worse. It showed a clear contrast in leadership. Stefanski, evasive, avoidant, and passive. Sanders, accountable, poised, and professional. That contrast matters. Especially in a league where image and leadership go hand in hand. While Stefanski fumbled every opportunity to step up, Sanders did what he's done all season. Owned his performance, took the high road, and refused to play the blame game, even when the blame wasn't his to carry. That's maturity. That's leadership. That's the kind of mentality you build a franchise around. But how can you build around someone while letting the system quietly sabotage him? And let's be clear, this isn't just about one game. This is part of a larger pattern with Stefanski. Questionable game management, reckless decisions, strange two-point conversion calls, clock mismanagement, lack of offensive adjustments. And in every case, when the decisions backfire, it's silence, or vague coach speak, or worse, subtle deflection. Now apply that pattern to the way he's handled Sanders. It's the same formula. Delay the debut. Throw him into a high-stakes situation with minimal support. And when the tools fail him, step back and let the narrative form. That's not leadership. That's image control. That's a head coach trying to avoid heat by letting a rookie quarterback take it instead. And where is ownership in all this? Jimmy Haslam's indecision is becoming part of the problem. When the front office refuses to draw a line, dysfunction spreads. Everyone's waiting for direction. Players, fans, even media. But the silence is telling. And it's hurting the team more than they realize. Because while Haslam waits, Stefanski continues to control the messaging. And the message right now? That the problems with this team are player-related. Not coaching. Not structure. Not decisions. And when that message gets repeated long enough, it sticks. That's how promising players become scapegoats. That's how reputations get warped before they've even had time to grow. But Sanders isn't shrinking. He's not cracking under the weight of it. And that alone should terrify the coaching staff. Because the more people see him take responsibility for failures that weren't his fault, the more they realize who's really holding this team back. Sanders is doing everything you want from a future franchise quarterback. He's professional, honest, and composed, even while being undermined by the people paid to develop him. But he can't do it alone. No quarterback, no matter how mentally strong, can thrive in a system that sets him up to fail. And that's the real danger here. Because every week this continues, every game where Sanders has to carry the weight of Stefanski's poor decisions, is a week that chips away at his growth, his confidence, his trajectory. The Browns are gambling with their future. And they're doing it to protect a coach whose leadership has clearly run out of gas. So now the spotlight's on Cleveland's front office. Do they double down on a coach who's failed to support his quarterback in the most basic ways? Or do they finally pull the plug before Stefanski does irreversible damage to a player who has shown more professionalism in a single post-game interview than his coach has all season? That choice is coming. Fast. And if they make the wrong one, it won't just be Stefanski's reputation that collapses. It'll be the trust of the locker room, the faith of the fan base, and the career trajectory of a quarterback who deserves a chance, a real one, to lead. Drop your thoughts below. Do you believe Stefanski's behavior points to sabotage, or is this just incompetent coaching at its worst? Should the Browns move on now, or risk watching another quarterback's future get wasted? Like this, if you're done with the excuses, share it with someone still defending the coaching staff, and subscribe if you're staying locked in as this story continues to unravel. Because if this is how the Browns treat their future, then maybe it's time for that future to find better leadership. At this point, you'd think Kevin Stefanski would have said something, anything, to calm the storm. A real apology, a detailed explanation, a moment of humility. Instead, we've gotten a masterclass in coach-speak evasion. And while Stefanski tries to downplay what happened, the reality is obvious to anyone who's been paying attention. This isn't just about one bad game. This is about an entire system collapsing around a young quarterback who's being asked to hold it all together. Let's not downplay the weight of what Shedeur Sanders has walked into. He stepped into an organization with a messy track record, a fan base desperate for a hero, and a head coach who, let's be honest, never seemed particularly invested in seeing him succeed. And still, Sanders showed up with professionalism, resilience, and an almost alarming level of patience. He didn't rock the boat. He didn't call out the staff. Even when everything started to crumble around him, he kept his composure. That's rare. That's not something you teach in film sessions or locker room speeches. That's leadership. And that's what makes all of this so infuriating. Because instead of meeting that level of leadership with real support, Stefanski has built a pattern of minimizing, sidestepping, and quite possibly orchestrating a quiet sabotage of Sanders' growth. The wristband incident was just the flashpoint. It was the visible moment that made everything else snap into focus. Think about it. What rookie quarterback gets his first high-pressure start and is literally sent out onto the field without a functioning play-calling system? And even more absurd, What coach responds to that with miscommunication, like that's an acceptable explanation? Let's be real. That wasn't a tech glitch. That was an operational failure. And in an NFL game? That's the equivalent of asking your quarterback to play blindfolded and then blaming him for bumping into the wall. And what does Stefanski do after the game? He dodges. He doesn't clarify what happened, doesn't take responsibility, doesn't even acknowledge the severity of it. He lets the media speculate. He lets Sanders answer for it. He lets the silence do the dirty work. That's not a glitch in communication. That's a pattern of deflection. It would be bad enough if that was the only thing. But it's not. The questionable game management? That's not new. The bizarre two-point decisions when the game could have easily been tied? Also not new. The refusal to adapt the offense when things clearly aren't working? Again, not new. This is a coach who has consistently chosen stubbornness over strategy, and now it looks like he's doing the same with his players. And the clearest sign that this has all become a pattern? The way Stefanski refuses to answer whether it was a mistake to delay Sanders' debut. Let's not gloss over that. He was asked point blank, "Do you regret not starting Shedeur Sanders earlier in the season?" And what did he say? Nothing. He danced. He deflected. He wouldn't even entertain the premise that maybe, just maybe, he didn't handle the situation the right way. That alone says everything. Because if there was ever a time to say, yeah, looking back we could have handled that better, it was right then. But Stefanski couldn't do it. Because admitting that would mean admitting that Sanders might have been ready sooner. And if Sanders was ready sooner, then why was he sitting? And that's the question Stefanski doesn't want to answer. Because then people might start asking, was this ever about development? Or was it about control? Was Stefanski waiting for the perfect moment not for Sanders to succeed, but for himself to avoid criticism? Was Sanders being held back not because he wasn't prepared, but because Stefanski wasn't ready to admit he got it wrong? That's what this entire controversy points to, a hidden agenda. A coach who's more concerned with shielding his own record than investing in the growth of a quarterback who's clearly built for the pressure. And the Browns' ownership? Silent. No public support for Sanders. No public pressure on Stefanski. Just floating in limbo, letting the dysfunction fester. And the longer Jimmy Haslam waits, the more obvious it becomes that this isn't just a coaching problem, it's a leadership problem at every level. Because what kind of organization allows this narrative to spiral out of control? What kind of franchise sees a young quarterback being subtly undermined and chooses to say nothing? And what kind of owner sees his team devolving into a PR disaster and decides not to make a move? The answer? One that's either willfully blind or dangerously complacent. And meanwhile, Sanders keeps pushing forward. Still answering the tough questions. Still owning up to things that weren't his fault. Still behaving like the face of the franchise, while the actual leadership hides behind microphones and media filters. That's what makes this situation feel so broken. It's not just the losses. It's the lack of direction. It's the fact that a rookie quarterback is doing the emotional heavy lifting while his head coach refuses to take even the smallest step toward transparency. And every week this goes on, the risk increases, not just to the season but to Sanders' development. Quarterbacks don't grow in toxic environments. They regress. They lose confidence. They start second-guessing. And no matter how mentally tough you are, no player can thrive in a system where you're being subtly framed as the issue while the coach quietly steps away from the mess. That's why this isn't just about football. This is about trust. And right now, Stefanski has shattered it. Not just with Sanders but with the fan base. With the team. With anyone who expected better from a coach in his position. The Browns have a quarterback who's shown up with the right mindset, the right work ethic, and the right leadership instincts. What they don't have is a coaching staff, or an owner, willing to protect that asset. And if they don't act soon, it'll cost them. Because no matter how good Shedeur Sanders is, no matter how composed or talented or focused, he cannot fix this system on his own. He cannot carry a franchise that refuses to carry him. He cannot grow in a structure that is actively failing to support him. This isn't just a bad week. It's a breaking point. And every decision from here on out, whether it's from Stefanski, from Haslam, or from the front office, will determine whether the Browns are ready to build something real around their quarterback, or whether they're going to let politics, ego, and mismanagement take it all down. And now that the truth is starting to take shape, it's impossible to look away. What was once dismissed as just a bad game, or rookie struggles, has become a textbook example of what happens when a coach prioritizes his own reputation over the future of his team. Kevin Stefanski isn't just out of sync with his quarterback, he's out of touch with reality. Because while the national conversation grows louder, while the fanbase starts connecting the dots, while analysts are openly calling this out as one of the most bizarre coaching narratives of the season, Stefanski's still pretending like nothing's wrong. That's what makes this different. This isn't an emotional reaction to a couple of losses. This is a direct response to patterns. Repeated choices. Calculated silence. A very clear shift in blame, and a refusal to address what everyone else can see. Shedeur Sanders is being mismanaged. Not because he lacks talent. Not because he's not ready. But because his success threatens to unravel the carefully controlled image Stefanski has tried to maintain. Let's go back to the beginning. Sanders arrives in Cleveland with all the raw tools. Arm strength, football IQ, maturity beyond his years. And even then he's not handed the reins. Fine. Teams ease rookies in. But as the season progresses and the Browns' offense sputters, fans start asking, why not give Sanders a shot? Stefanski doesn't answer. He doesn't give specifics. He just keeps pushing the narrative that we'll make the decision when the time is right. And then, when that time comes, Sanders is thrown into a high-stakes game against the Bears with zero margin for error, and the most basic communication tool, the wristband, is faulty. You can't make that. And the part that really flips the table? Sanders doesn't complain. He doesn't deflect. He doesn't take the bait to point fingers. He simply says the truth, the card fell out. Just like that, the entire post-game storyline shifts. It's not about performance anymore. It's about preparation, coaching, intent, accountability, or the complete lack of it. Because if Stefanski knew the wristband was faulty and let Sanders go out there anyway, that's sabotage. If he didn't know and didn't fix it, that's negligence. And if he found out and tried to cover it with a vague miscommunication comment, that's worse. In every version of this scenario, one fact remains: Sanders was failed. And while Stefanski continues to guard his public image with calculated ambiguity, Sanders continues to show maturity beyond his years. That's not just impressive, it's damning. Because it forces everyone watching to ask, if this is how Sanders acts under pressure, why wasn't he starting earlier? Why was he being framed as not ready? Shedeur Sanders match photos, that's where the sabotage conversation stops being speculation and becomes a real accusation. Because if Stefanski truly believed in Sanders, he would have done everything possible to set him up for success. He would have taken the blame. He would have explained the mistake. He would have reassured the public that the coaching staff, not the rookie, had let the team down. But he didn't. He ducked it. And you don't duck something unless you have something to protect. That's why this story hasn't gone away. That's why it's escalated. Because it's not about one decision anymore, it's about all of them. The game mismanagement. The delay in naming Sanders the starter. The failure to support him during his debut. The refusal to say, yes, I should have started him earlier. When you line it all up, the pattern becomes painfully obvious. Stefanski doesn't want to be wrong. About anything. And if that means subtly undercutting a young quarterback's momentum, letting the public blame fall elsewhere, and hiding behind vague statements, then so be it. But that kind of leadership has a short shelf life. Because players see it. Coaches can feel it. The locker room notices who gets protected and who gets fed to the wolves. And if your franchise quarterback is the one being left out to dry, that's a problem. A massive problem. Especially when your quarterback has done everything right. Shedeur Sanders didn't fumble the wristband. He didn't call the wrong plays. He didn't make the decision to go for a risky two-point conversion instead of tying the game. He's not managing the clock. He's not designing the offensive scheme. He's executing what's given to him. And he's doing it with composure, despite being thrown into an unstable situation. It's wild that he's the one getting questioned. And again, let's not forget who's still quiet in all this: ownership. Jimmy Haslam hasn't said a word. Not a statement. Not a show of support for Sanders. Not a clarification about Stefanski's future. Just silence. And that silence is enabling everything. Because without clear leadership from the top, Stefanski gets to keep doing this. Keep controlling the narrative, keep dodging accountability, keep hiding behind the idea that rookies need time. But what happens when the rookie outgrows the excuses? What happens when Sanders proves he's capable, and the only thing holding him back is a coach more interested in optics than outcomes? You can't have it both ways. You can't say you're building around your quarterback while failing to protect him. You can't call him the future while making him answer for your mistakes. And you definitely can't treat him like a franchise cornerstone one day, then hang him out to dry the next. It's not sustainable. And it's not honest. At some point, the Browns will have to face the music. Either Stefanski is the right coach to develop Sanders or he's not. But they can't keep pretending this gray area is okay. Because Sanders deserves clarity. The team deserves clarity. The fans deserve clarity. And if Stefanski can't provide it, someone else needs to. Because right now, the Browns are looking like an organization willing to waste a franchise-level talent just to avoid firing a coach who refuses to admit when he's wrong. And that's the real loss. Not the scoreboard. Not the stat lines. But the opportunity cost. The long-term damage being done to a quarterback who is showing every sign of being special. If only someone would get out of his way. So where does Cleveland go from here? If they stay silent, they're complicit. If they let Stefanski continue dodging responsibility, they're endorsing his behavior. And if they choose to ignore the writing on the wall, they're choosing mediocrity over accountability. The locker room knows. The fanbase knows. The league is starting to take notice. Now it's time to decide. Will they fix it, or will they watch another potential franchise quarterback get swallowed by dysfunction? Because make no mistake, Shedeur Sanders won't say it. He won't complain. He won't throw his coach under the bus. But if this continues, it won't matter. The damage will already be done. The Browns are teetering on the edge of a full-blown identity crisis, and at the center of it all is a head coach who's either too stubborn to adapt or too self-serving to care. Kevin Stefanski's refusal to answer for the wristband incident wasn't just disappointing, it was revealing. It showed us that this isn't a coach trying to learn and grow with his team. It's a coach trying to shield himself from blame, even if it means letting a rookie quarterback take the fall for systemic failures. And Shedeur Sanders? He deserves so much better. He walked into dysfunction and responded with discipline. He's handled sabotage with strength. While Stefanski hides behind vague phrases and soft-spoken pressers, Sanders steps in front of the cameras and takes hits he didn't deserve, on the field and off it. This isn't just a bad moment in a rough season. It's a test of what kind of franchise the Browns want to be. Do they stand by a coach who avoids accountability? Or do they start building around a young quarterback who's already shown more leadership than the man calling the plays? If they choose silence, they're choosing regression. Let us know what you think. Has Stefanski crossed the line from mismanagement into sabotage? Should the Browns make a change now before it's too late for Sanders? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like, if you're done with excuses, share this with someone who needs to see the full story and hit subscribe. We're just getting started.